I heard that the soul consists of memory, intellect, and will. Is this correct? This is an email from Sue.
Well, Sue, that's in good part it's correct. You could, make it go a little further than that. I mean, memory, intellect, and will describe three intellectual functions. And what I'm going to say is, first of all, it includes self-consciousness. First and foremost, our awareness of ourselves. So the first thing that we have is self-awareness in the soul. And it's this self-consciousness under which the function of memory and intellect and will occur. So first of all, you've got two intellectual functions, namely memory and will. So, and that, by the way, in the near-death experiences I have described, in a couple of different programs here in Father Spitzer's universe, no question about it, in every single solitary case, and we're talking about thousands of cases where people have been witnessing veridical data, where blind people have been seeing for the first time, where people have been going over to the other side and reporting data or the words of people that they met while they were over on the other side. All of those things occurred through memory. And it's a spiritual memory. It is not a physical memory of the brain. So there's an overlapping, right, between the spiritual memory we have and that will survive bodily death and the organic physical memory we have in our brain that comes from protein cell synthesis in the various cortexes where the memory function occurs, including the visual and auditory cortex, etc. So you do have some overlap, but that memory function in the brain, though, is subordinate to the spiritual memory that survives bodily death and is shown to occur not only in near-death experiences, but was promised to occur by Jesus himself. The second thing is you also have intellect. Now, for years, right, even from the time of Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, right, the intellect was always thought to be a spiritual substance. And what they meant by the intellect was the capacity for abstraction, to take something which you might have experienced in the world as a physical object, but to transform it into a transphysical idea. And we call this transformation that takes place, we call it through heuristic notions. And there are some really good proofs that this kind of intellectual function cannot be reduced to mere physical processes. Some of these proofs go back to Plato, some of them to St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine. Some of them are really excellently articulated by Bernard Lonergan in a book called Insight, a study of human understanding, which is a 20th century, who is a 20th century philosopher. We also have a variety of other contemporary articulations of that, where you actually prove that this intellectual function that, as it were, spiritualizes our experience into abstract ideas that can be used as predicates and objects, they can be used as the tools of analysis and synthesis that can be used to relate ideas to other ideas. This kind of function is a spiritual function first and foremost. It cannot be reduced to the brain because it cannot be reduced to a physical process. So this idea of intellect being spiritual, contained in the soul, is an absolutely true one. And today, with today's near-death experiences, with today's kind of articulations of what takes place in the intellect, with David Chalmers' new studies of self-consciousness, right, which show that cannot be reduced. The human inwardness of subjectivity cannot be reduced to physical processes, right? This is taking place at Oxford and Cambridge, right? These kinds of studies in the philosophy of mind. There is a huge amount of evidence that the soul, the intellectual function actually occurs through the soul, and that only more basic functions, what we call perceptual ideas, as opposed, conceptual ideas all take place through the spiritual substance of the soul, the intellect, which is the spiritual substance of the soul. Perceptual ideas, these are the ideas that come, they're associations of, for example, the word banana with an object that looks like a banana. Those kinds of perceptual ideas, which even chimpanzees can have, can definitely be explained by the brain. But once you get into the realm of conceptual ideas, it cannot be explained by physical processes. And one good piece of evidence for that is the test I talked about last time, Noam Chomsky's syntax test. No chimpanzee has ever been able to pass the syntax test, even if they learned like 160 words of sign language, right, in American Sign Language. Even if they've learned that many word associations, to be frank with you, they have never been able to distinguish dog bites man from man bites dog, and similar kinds of syntactical distinctions. So the chimpanzee has no conceptual ideas, and of course conceptual ideas are required to understand syntax and to understand the universality of grammar, which every single child in every single culture in the world, no matter how different the grammar is, no matter how different the syntax is, you plunk that 1-year-old from Africa into China, he'll get Chinese soon enough because he already understands conceptual ideas, which the chimpanzee will never do. So that intellectual function is also a matter of the soul. Now we get to the will. And the will in the scholastic area is just such a huge concept. It not only includes self-consciousness, but it includes all of the major intuitions and emotions that we have. So the will is inclusive of emotive functions. It's inclusive of intuitive functions. So, included in this mega faculty, if I can put it this way, are intuitions of the good, namely the foundation of our moral reasoning power, intuitions of beauty, the foundation for our aesthetic powers, intuitions of love, or empathy, which are based on our desire to love. And so, of course, we have these intuitions that ground conscience, that ground empathy, that ground love, that ground morality, that ground beauty, right? The beautiful, the good, love, and of course we've talked about the truth and intellectual function just a little earlier on. And of course, God himself, the spiritual function. So all of these huge intuitive functions are part of the idea of the will. So is this spiritualized, are you asking me? The answer is yes. Okay. All of those capacities are spiritualized, and there's a very interesting proof of that too. St. Augustine articulated a proof based on Plato's proof, of the transcendentals. And that proof is based on the fact that we don't just desire some truth, we desire perfect truth. And of course, I can explain that proof a little bit later in the show. Right. But it's our desire for perfect truth, perfect love, perfect goodness, perfect beauty, and perfect home in God. Yeah. We have to have the awareness that makes those desires possible, which means we already have to have a tacit awareness of perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home. And where, I ask you, did you get a tacit awareness of perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home so that you could desire it? Well, you didn't get it from the outside world. You certainly didn't get it from your physical brain, which of course is restricted by algorithmically finite physical structures. So where did you get it from? The cause must be commensurate with the effect. So essentially, you must have a cause that is perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home in order to cause this effect, this awareness of perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home within us, causing our desire for it. Now, that's part of the will. But is that going to be transcendental? Is that going to be spiritual? Absolutely, it is spiritual. And then the self-conscious faculty itself, which can choose between those great intuitions of perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home versus me, and me, egocentricity. At the end of the day, Our self-consciousness has a way of getting beyond its attachment to itself so that it can see from on high the call to the good, the beautiful, which is God himself, right? The majestic, awesome God, the unconditional love and the home that God is in himself versus, of course, the things that will aggrandize me, that will make me a self-idolater, as it were, that will make me the center of the universe. And so the self-consciousness standing on high above its own grasp of itself compares this to the great intuitions of perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home, and even the desire for God himself, and must make the decision. Does that faculty have to be spiritual? Absolutely. Because if the transcendental desires and transcendental awareness cannot be reduced to a physical process, neither can the faculty that decides between them and, of course, itself.
Okay.
Can that be? So all of it. You're absolutely correct. Yes, all those things are spiritual,
are there,
and all those things, constitute the soul. And there's some overlapping with respect to memory, but in everything else, I tell you, it's spiritual.
Okay.
And the scholastics, Aristotle had it right from the beginning.